Can you give your living space to me? It's too cramped with 3 kids.
Suddenly, with her kids in tow, Amy showed up at the two-family home where my spouse and I were living with my in-laws. At Amy's outrageous request, both my husband Sean and I were stunned. Facing our speechlessness, the in-laws also sided with Amy.
The place you guys are living in, isn't it too big for just the two of you? Giving it up to this girl with 3 growing kids is just common decency, isn't it?
You two would be fine in a storage room.
At their unreasonable demands, I lost my patience. I couldn't take it anymore. I decided they deserved divine punishment for their selfish behavior. With a poker face, I responded, "All right, as you wish, my husband Sean and I will leave." With that, I took Sean's hand and we moved from the two-family house to a modest apartment. A few days after moving, I received a call from Amy on my smartphone and instinctively answered. What hit my ears was Amy's voice, sounding desperate and angry.
What's the meaning of this? I got a notice from the real estate agent to vacate. You know something about this. What did you do?
The revenge I took on them, who had taken over our home, was, my name is Heather. I am a home-based worker in my 30s, living with my husband, Sean. The way I met my husband was through a blind date. Having worked from home for a long time before marriage, I had no chance to meet men, which bothered my parents enough to arrange a blind date for me without my knowledge. Initially, I thought it was unnecessary and was confused, but when I actually went to the blind date, the person I met was surprisingly pleasant. Finding common ground, we hit it off and eventually started dating, leading to marriage. The man I married, Sean, is kind and dependable, though a bit timid, possessing qualities I often lack, as I'm considered strong-willed but inflexible. Our married life with him was going smoothly. Sean's parents lived in the town next to ours. Though we didn't live with the in-laws, we maintained a fairly good relationship, occasionally staying in touch and being invited to their home. A few years into our marriage, Katie started suggesting we live together.
We're getting on in years, and thinking about the future makes us anxious. Hey, if you don't mind, why don't we live together?
Katie mentioned it casually, not wanting to force us, but then the in-laws began to bring up the idea of living together now and then. I could understand the in-laws' concerns about feeling insecure living just the two of them at their age, and I thought living with them, with whom we had a good relationship, might be nice. I was positive about it, but Sean seemed to have some reservations. Are you opposed to living with Katie and the others?
Well, I think it'll be okay.
His indecisive attitude was usual, so I didn't think much of it. Little did I know that such thoughts would lead to an unforeseen situation. One day, while leading a peaceful life, tragedy struck me suddenly. My parents were killed in a car accident. The suddenness of it left me in shock. Being an only child with no close cousins or relatives to rely on, I had to arrange the funeral without time to grieve. Since I already had no grandparents, I was to inherit all of my parents' estate. I had acquired a considerable amount of assets and my parents' land and house, but the grief of losing my parents and the business of the procedures made it impossible for me to be honestly happy. During this tough time, my kind husband, Sean, was always there, supporting me. And the in-laws, too, showed empathy towards me, unable to express my feelings freely.
Heather, it's okay to cry when you're sad. Losing your biological parents so suddenly, it's natural to feel sorrow. I understand there's a lot you need to do, but you must first accept your feelings.
Katie told me, making me realize I hadn't cried since my parents passed away. Finally, I was able to cry my heart out. Even after the funeral and inheritance issues were settled, the in-laws seemed more concerned about me, visiting our home more often and bringing gifts.
If it bothers you, feel free to say no.
Katie laughs at this, but I felt very comforted by the presence of my parents-in-law, who were so kind and concerned about me. I gradually came to think of my parents-in-law as my real parents, who were there for me and worried about me. Then one day, while having tea and chatting at our home, Katie brought up the subject of living together again after a long time.
Hey, about the living together thing we talked about before. Even though Sean is with you, you must feel lonely losing your parents. Heather, would you seriously consider living with us?
We really want to live with you and Sean. Of course, we can wait until you feel ready, but could you start thinking seriously about it soon?
With earnest expressions, the in-laws made the proposal again, warming my heart. After they left, I discussed it with Sean, who was back from work. Katie and her husband proposed living together again. We have to deal with my parents' house, and I was thinking maybe it's a good opportunity to build a new home for us to live together. What do you think, Sean?
Well, yeah, I think it'll be okay. Let's do it.
Sean seemed to be worried about something, but he ultimately agreed with my wish. We then conveyed our desire to live with the in-laws and started preparing for it. My inherited family home was old, so we decided to demolish it and build a new two-family home on the land to live with the in-laws. The demolition and construction were costly, but thankfully, my parents' inheritance covered the expenses, and a few months later, a new duplex house under my name was completed. My parents-in-law liked the completed new house, and with a sense of relief, I started living with them with a renewed spirit. Initially, living with the parents was harmonious. However, I gradually began to feel a coldness in their attitude towards us.
Hey, Heather, don't vacuum at such hours. It's too noisy.
You're home all day. You can clean anytime. You need to be more considerate of us in your daily life.
At first, there were many comments about lifestyle differences and noise, but gradually, criticisms and nagging about household chores increased.
It's nice you invited us for dinner, but this meal is so plain, right? Make something more luxurious.
Isn't your hospitality lacking? Really, what kind of upbringing did your parents give you?
Their cold words pierced my heart. But I thought it was due to my immaturity that they pointed things out. They must be scolding me for my own good, I believed. So I accepted their harsh and thorny words and endured. Even so, the sudden change from their previously kind and warm attitude gradually depressed me. When I vented to Sean, it seemed he had some realization.
I thought as much. No, Heather, it's not your fault. You're managing both work and home perfectly and are the ideal wife for me, so don't worry about what my mom says.
Sean's smile and words slightly healed my heart, hurt by the in-laws' attitude. Still, it seemed hard for Sean to speak up or oppose the in-laws, and the fundamental issue remained unresolved. Gradually, the in-laws' cold treatment escalated beyond words and behavior. They stopped contributing to the shared expenses for utilities and living costs that they had previously split with us.
You and Sean are working, so you have money, right? Asking us, who live on our pensions, to pay is not nice, don't you think? When did you become such ungrateful children?
With no comeback to such accusations, we had no choice but to cover the in-laws' share of the living and utility expenses. Then one day, something shocking happened.
My husband was cheating on me, so I divorced him. That's why you gotta let us live here too.
Amy said this and came barging into our home with her 3 still young children in tow. Sean and I were perplexed, but the in-laws welcomed Amy and her children.
This is your home too. Why would we say no? We're more than happy to live with our grandkids.
What a terrible has been to cheat like that. You must be exhausted. Come in and rest first.
Yay, thanks. We'll make ourselves at home.
Without even trying to get our consent, who were supposed to be co-living, the in-laws joyfully welcomed Amy and her children. It would have been one thing if it was just a temporary visit, but to move in without our consent. I was hardly convinced and cautiously approached Katie. Well, Katie, suddenly living with Amy and all, it's a bit. Hearing this, Katie glared at me with a cold voice, thinking I was against living with Amy.
What about, you want her to go out on the street because her husband left her, even though the children are still young? How can you say such a cold thing? Are you still a human being?
Katie snapped at me. I hurriedly tried to correct the misunderstanding, but Katie wouldn't listen. No, that's not what I meant. I just wish we had been consulted about living together, that's all.
What's the difference? You're just against living with them. After all, they're going to live in our part of the house, so your consent isn't needed. Mind your own business.
With that, Katie slammed the door leading to the in-laws' living space. Left alone, I was dumbfounded by Amy and the in-laws' unreasonable actions and arguments. Living together with Amy and her children, which started by default, was terrible, to put it mildly. Amy's children would barge into our living space, running around and breaking things. Despite repeatedly telling them not to enter our room and asking Amy to scold them, I was only rebuffed.
What? Don't meddle in my family's business. And don't you dare scold my kids.
It's not that I was scolding them. I just wish they'd learn not to carelessly move between our living spaces or make noise in someone else's home. At least some basic rules.
That's being bossy. You let me live in your mother's house. Who do you think you are?
Amy yelled with a flushed face and then slammed the door to the in-laws' living area. Apparently, Amy was under the mistaken belief that the house belonged to the in-laws, but I couldn't correct her. In the end, Amy's children's behavior didn't improve. They would intrude into my office and disrupt my work, making both my personal and professional life increasingly stressful. While observing the children, I noticed something. At first glance, the children looked neat, but upon closer inspection, they had numerous cavities and their nails were bitten and ragged, showing neglect in their care, including their lack of manners. It seemed Amy wasn't really looking after the kids properly. The in-laws, perhaps too indulgent with their grandchildren, didn't seem to pay much attention either. Ever since Amy and her kids came, our lives have been a mess. I'm reaching my limit. Exhausted by the daily chaos, Sean finally confided in me his long-held concerns. It appeared the in-laws had always favored Amy, leaving Sean feeling neglected. However, the in-laws maintained a good facade outside, never letting anyone perceive the family discord or their true nature, and were always regarded as a close-knit family of 4. Sean said that he moved out and started living alone when he got a job, and since then, the in-laws' attitude softened, showing more kindness and consideration. This behavior continued even after I married Sean, and they were also kind to me, so I thought they had changed for the better. But their behavior since we started living together was the same as Sean's childhood experiences. While the in-laws doted on Amy, they ignored Sean, even looking down on him and treating him coldly. This attitude became more evident after they accepted Amy moving in, convincing Sean that the in-laws hadn't changed at all.
It seems that my parents' true nature shows depending on whether we live together or not. They are kind and perfect to everyone outside, as long as we don't live with them. But their real attitudes are what we've seen since living together. I'm sorry for not realizing this sooner and making you suffer, Heather.
He said with teary-eyed and apologized. I was shocked by Sean's revelation. I couldn't believe that the kind in-laws I knew before we lived together were just a facade, and they had always looked down on us. Though I had started to suspect something was off with the recent attitudes of the in-laws and Amy, facing the reality was still painful. However, silent as he was about it, Sean was a victim too. I couldn't bring myself to be angry with him. Thank you for telling me. Sean, it's not your fault, so don't apologize. Knowing the true nature of the in-laws, I felt the inferiority I had towards them disappear. Secretly, I began making preparations to escape from the in-laws and Amy whenever necessary. A few weeks later, on a day off while Sean and I were relaxing in the living room, Amy made an outrageous suggestion.
It's too cramped here for the kids to play freely, since this is where Mom and Dad live. So give us your living space.
Wait, are you saying we should leave our own home? Stunned by Amy's absurd claim, both Sean and I were speechless. Amy scoffed at us.
Oh, look at you figuring it out. Yes, I'm telling you to get out.
As I was lost for words, Katie came from behind Amy.
The place you two are living in is too spacious for just the two of you, right? It's only natural to hand it over to this girl with 3 growing kids.
Katie said with a smirk, prompting me to retort. That's outrageous. This is our home too. Where do you expect us to live?
Not my problem. Live in a storage room or something. That should be enough for the two of you.
Katie said dismissively, with Amy nodding in agreement. I felt my patience finally snap. I couldn't stand it anymore. They deserved to face consequences for their selfish actions. With that resolve in my heart, I responded expressionlessly. All right, my husband and I will leave this place. But it's difficult to move out immediately, so please wait a week. We'll leave as you wish in 1 week. With that, I took my husband's hand and turned our backs on Amy and her children, who were squealing with joy. Alone with my husband, Sean looked down with a frustrated expression.
Heather, I'm sorry. I couldn't say anything.
To my disheartened husband, I revealed a plan. It's okay, I've got it all figured out. Actually, Sean was surprised by my suggestion but agreed. We then proceeded with the moving preparations, and a week later arrived.
As you wish, we are leaving this house. But in exchange, we will sever our family ties with you and my sister today.
Sean declared, which the in-laws seemed to accept without any concern.
Yes, go ahead. You're nothing but a failure of a son anyway.
I'm so relieved the nuisances are gone. Now, this house is just for us.
With cold eyes, Sean and I left the duplex we had lived in. We moved into a rented apartment as a temporary measure and started living peacefully, just the two of us, in a quiet space. A few days after the move, while I was working from home and decided to take a break, I noticed a flood of missed calls from the in-laws and Amy on my personal smartphone. As I was surprised by this, another call from Amy came in. I answered instinctively, and Amy's shouting voice pierced my ears.
What the heck? The real estate agent contacted us to vacate. You know something about this. What did you do?
In fact, after Sean revealed the in-laws' true nature, I had been preparing to sell the house we lived in with them. I secretly requested estimates from several real estate agents, selected one, and initiated the sale process right after they declared they were kicking us out. The assessed value of the house itself was beaten down by the fact that it was a duplex, although it was newly built, but the land was a single lot, so they were able to get a good price there. Thus, I managed to sell the land and the new duplex I inherited from my parents, recovering a significant amount of money.
That's ridiculous. That house belongs to my parents. You can't just sell it.
Amy seemed to be under the mistaken belief that the house was in the in-laws' name, so I corrected her. No, I built the house under my name, so it was legally mine. I was just leasing part of the living space to Katie and her husband. Well, now it's sold, so it's someone else's house.
What did you say?
It seemed the call was on speaker, as I could hear not only Amy's but also Katie's shocked voice.
What? The house wasn't in Sean's name. We thought it was his, so naturally, it would be ours as his parents.
You deceived us, you liar.
At the moment you said you were leaving, normally the property rights should have been transferred to us. What ungrateful cowards.
The in-laws and Amy yelled and hurled insults. I dismissed them with, "It's not fair to say that we cheated you. You are the ones who misunderstood me. I just got rid of my property, so please leave as soon as possible." With that, I hung up, ignoring Amy's continued ranting. The in-laws, having received an eviction notice from the real estate agent, had no choice but to vacate the new house reluctantly. Rumor has it that the in-laws and Amy's family, having lost their place to live, started renting an apartment, but the children's mischief and noise led to numerous complaints from neighbors. Due to the sheer number of complaints and the severity of the mischief, it seems the landlord could not stay silent, and they were evicted from the apartment within a month. Having lost their place to live again, the distressed in-laws shockingly stormed into Sean's office.
Call Sean. We are his family. We have something to say to him.
The receptionist, sensing something was wrong from their shouting in the lobby, discreetly contacted Sean while detaining Amy and her parents. Sean explained the situation to his boss, called the police, and the in-laws and Amy were detained when the police arrived. Sean appeared in front of the in-laws only after the police arrived. Seeing Sean, the in-laws resisted fiercely as they were being taken by the police, shouting at him,
You ungrateful son.
Because of you, we lost our home. Take responsibility.
Calling the police? Are you insane? Is that how you treat your family?
To the desperately shouting in-laws and Amy, Sean calmly stated,
I don't have parents or a sister. I had people who were my parents and sister, but I cut ties with them a few days ago. You and I are strangers. I simply asked the police to deal with the nuisance in our company's lobby. What of it?
What?
Stunned by Sean's words, the in-laws were speechless. Amy, on the other hand, kept blaming Sean, crying and shouting, "You traitor, heartless," but was eventually taken away by the police. While the in-laws and Amy were being interrogated, we met once with Amy's husband and his parents. They revealed that Amy was the one who had the affair, and although he initiated the divorce, it wasn't finalized yet. Including the recent police incident, Amy's husband demanded a divorce again and sought alimony for the affair. Reluctantly, Amy agreed, and their divorce was finally settled. After the divorce, the children's custody was awarded to Amy's ex-husband. Taking care of the children with help from his parents, he disciplined them well, and now they are said to be very well behaved. After the police incident, the in-laws and Amy were released with just a stern warning and started living in a run-down cheap apartment. This was because while living with us, they had spent their money on luxury items instead of contributing to the living and utility expenses, nearly depleting their savings. Amy, unaware of this, was furious.
What the heck? I didn't know about this. I was counting on your money for the alimony and living expenses.
That's your problem. You were the one who cheated and got divorced. Pay your own alimony. You brought this on yourself.
How dare you, you old witch?
Even the in-laws, who had doted on Amy, seemed to have lost their patience, and now they were constantly arguing about money. Amy, having cut ties with her affair partner, could not rely on anyone and had to start working part-time out of necessity. However, Amy seems to be causing trouble at her job, and it's only a matter of time before she gets fired. Despite these troubles, the in-laws' spending habits haven't changed. With their living expenses stretched thin and no chance of saving, their financial situation continues to deteriorate. The possibility of being evicted from their apartment due to rent arrears seems imminent. While hearing about the downfall of the in-laws through the grapevine, we used the money from selling the family land and duplex to buy a modest single-family home. Together with my kind husband, we are living a peaceful and happy life.